Power, wealth, and status usually scream the loudest in New York City, but sometimes a whisper in the right language changes everything. Lucia was just a server at the city's most pretentious restaurant, invisible to the elite clientele she served. Then walked in Lorenzo Romano, a billionaire shipping tycoon, accompanied by his terrifying, hard-to-please mother, and a socialite desperate for a ring. The dinner was a disaster of insults and arrogance, until the mother muttered something in Italian she thought no one would understand. She was wrong. Lucia didn't just understand, she answered. What followed was a moment of instant karma that silenced the room, humiliated a gold digger, and stole a billionaire's heart. This is the story of the waitress who spoke the language of love and war. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Velvet Room, Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment, located just blocks from Central Park. Inside, the air smelled of truffles, aged mahogany, and the distinct metallic scent of old money. Lucia tightened the apron around her waist, wincing slightly as the coarse fabric rubbed against a bruise on her hip, a souvenir from rushing to catch the overcrowded subway during rush hour. Her feet throbbed in the mandatory 2-inch heels, but she forced her posture to remain ramrod straight. She couldn't afford to slouch. She couldn't afford to breathe wrong. She certainly couldn't afford to lose this job. Table 4 is open. The Romanos are 5 minutes out. Gerard, the floor manager, hissed as he breezed past her. Gerard was a man who believed kindness was an inefficiency. He snapped his fingers near Lucia's face. "Lucia, wake up! You are on water and bread service for them. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look Mr. Romano in the eye. And for the love of God, if his mother complains, do not argue. Just nod and disappear." "Yes, sir," Lucia whispered, clutching her silver water pitcher like a shield. She knew who the Romanos were. Everyone did. Lorenzo Romano was 32, the CEO of Romano Shipping, and currently the most eligible bachelor on the East Coast. The tabloids painted him as a ruthless businessman with ice in his veins, a man who acquired companies as easily as he bought suits from Savile Row. But the real terror wasn't him. It was the matriarch, Donatella Romano. Rumor had it, she had made a Michelin star chef cry last week because the risotto was too emotional. Lucia adjusted her glasses. She wasn't supposed to be here. A year ago, she had been finishing her master's degree in art restoration in Florence, surrounded by the smell of turpentine and centuries-old oil paint. But then her father's heart attack happened. The medical bills in the States piled up like snowdrifts. The student visa expired. She had returned to New York, trading her brushes for a serving tray, her dreams for a paycheck that barely covered the rent of her studio apartment in Queens. The heavy oak doors swung open. The restaurant fell into a hushed silence, the kind that only happens when true power enters a room. Lorenzo Romano walked in first. He was taller than he looked in the magazines, wearing a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders with architectural precision. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of espresso, dark, intense, and currently looking incredibly bored. On his arm was Vanessa St. James. Lucia suppressed a groan. Vanessa was a regular. She was the daughter of a real estate mogul, a woman who treated service staff like furniture that occasionally moved. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than Lucia's father's car, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. But the presence that truly sucked the air out of the room trailed behind them. Donatella Romano walked with a cane, not because she needed it, but because she liked to point at things she disapproved of. She was draped in black silk, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was a map of stern lines, her eyes analyzing every flaw in the restaurant's decor. Gerard practically sprinted to the door, bowing so low Lucia thought he might pull a hamstring. "Signora Romano, Mr. Romano, Miss St. James, welcome. Your usual table is ready. It smells like cleaning fluid in here," Donatella said. Her voice was raspy and low, carrying a heavy accent that hadn't softened despite 40 years in America. "Mother, it smells like lavender. It's the potpourri," Lorenzo said, his voice deep and weary. He sounded like a man who had been having this conversation since breakfast. "Lavender covers the smell of dirt," Donatella snapped. "Let's sit." "My feet hurt." They moved toward table 4, the prime spot by the window. As they passed Lucia, Vanessa's oversized designer handbag swung out and clipped Lucia hard in the stomach. Lucia gasped, stumbling back a step, the water pitcher sloshing dangerously. Vanessa didn't even turn around. She just checked her bag for scratches. "Watch where you're standing," she threw over her shoulder, her tone dismissive. Lorenzo paused. He looked back, his dark eyes landing on Lucia. For a second, there was a flicker of something. Apology. Annoyance. But then Vanessa tugged on his arm. "Come on, Enzo. Don't let the help distract you. I have so much to tell you about the gala," Vanessa cooed, her voice changing from venom to honey in a millisecond. Lucia steadied herself, taking a deep breath. "Just get through the night," she told herself. "Just get the tips, pay the electric bill, buy Dad his medication." She approached the table to pour the water. Her hands shook slightly. "Sparkling or still?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Sparkling for me and Lorenzo," Vanessa commanded, taking charge immediately. "And the old lady will have tap water. She doesn't like the bubbles." Lucia froze. She looked at Donatella. The older woman's face tightened. To refer to the matriarch of the Romano family as the old lady was bold. To order tap water for her at a 5-star restaurant was an insult. "I will have sparkling," Donatella said, staring directly at Vanessa. "And a slice of lemon." Vanessa rolled her eyes, picking up the menu. "Whatever. Just bring it." Lucia poured the water with practiced precision. As she leaned in to place the glass near Lorenzo, she caught a scent of his cologne, sandalwood and sea salt. He looked up at her, and for a split second, their eyes locked. He looked exhausted, trapped between the preening socialite and his demanding mother. "Thank you," he murmured. "You're welcome, sir," Lucia said softly. "Excuse me," Vanessa snapped, snapping her fingers. "I didn't ask for ice in mine. Take it back." There was no ice in the glass. Lucia looked at the clear water. "Mom, there is no—" "I said take it back. It looks cold. I hate cold water. Bring me room temperature. God, is it so hard to find competent help these days?" Vanessa laughed, looking at Lorenzo for validation. "Honestly, Enzo, this place is going downhill. We should have gone to Le Bernardin." Lorenzo didn't smile. "Just change the water, please," he said to Lucia, his tone polite but distant. Lucia took the glass, her knuckles turning white around the stem. "Right away." As she walked away, she heard Vanessa's high-pitched giggle. "She looks like a frightened rabbit. I bet she drops the tray before the appetizers arrive." Lucia reached the service station and gripped the counter. She closed her eyes, imagining the rolling hills of Tuscany, the smell of her nonna's kitchen, the peace of the restoration studio. She counted to 10 in Italian. Uno, due, tre. She had to go back out there. She had to serve them. And she had a feeling the night was only going to get worse. By the time the appetizers arrived, the tension at table 4 was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Lucia hovered near the pillar, watching her assigned table like a hawk, waiting for the signal to clear plates. From her vantage point, she could see the dynamics playing out like a tragic play. Vanessa was doing all the talking, gesturing wildly with a forkful of tuna tartar, dropping names of politicians and designers. Lorenzo was nodding mechanically, checking his watch every 3 minutes. Donatella, however, was the most interesting. She hadn't touched her food. She sat with her arms crossed, staring out the window at the rain-slicked streets of New York, looking utterly lonely despite sitting with her son. "Is everything okay with the carpaccio?" Lucia asked, stepping forward during a lull in Vanessa's monologue about her Pilates instructor. Donatella looked up, her eyes sharp and critical. She poked the thinly sliced beef with her fork. "It is too cold. The meat has no soul. It tastes like it lived in a refrigerator its whole life. Never saw the sun. I can have the chef prepare something else, signora?" Lucia offered gently. "Don't bother," Vanessa interrupted, waving her hand. "She complains about everything. It's the best beef in the city, Donatella. Just eat it." Donatella's jaw set. She pushed the plate away. "In Italy, we do not eat plastic and call it food." "Well, we are in New York, darling," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Adapt or starve, I guess." Lorenzo set his wine glass down with a heavy clink. "Vanessa, that's enough." "I'm just saying, Enzo, she's ruining the vibe. We're supposed to be discussing the merger, and she's crying about cold meat." Vanessa turned to Lucia. "Take the plate, bring the main course, and bring another bottle of this Cabernet, quickly." Lucia reached for the plate. As she did, Donatella muttered under her breath, low and rapid, in a dialect of Italian specific to the central regions, the kind of dialect you only learn if you grew up running through the stone streets of old villages. "Questa donna è un serpente velenoso. Non ha rispetto, non ha cuore. Povero figlio mio, cieco di fronte a una strega. This woman is a poisonous snake. She has no respect, no heart. My poor son, blind in front of a witch." Lucia paused. Her hand hovered over the plate. The dialect was familiar. It was the same dialect her grandmother used to scold the butcher back home. It was the sound of her childhood. Lorenzo sighed, rubbing his temples. He clearly didn't understand the specific dialect, or perhaps he was just too tired to pass it. "Mama, please, speak English so Vanessa can understand." "I am speaking to myself," Donatella said stubbornly in English, "since no one else listens." "I listen, Mama, but you have to try to be—" "Fake?" Donatella challenged. "Agreeable," Lorenzo corrected. Vanessa laughed. "Oh, let her mutter, Enzo. Senility comes for us all eventually." That was it. The line. Lucia felt a heat rise up her neck. It wasn't professional. It wasn't safe. She needed this job. She needed the money. But she looked at Donatella's face, the humiliation burning in the old woman's eyes as this young, arrogant socialite treated her like a nuisance. She thought of her own father, struggling in a hospital bed, and how she would burn the world down if someone spoke to him like that. Lucia picked up the plate. She looked at Vanessa, then she looked directly at Donatella. She didn't speak in English. She didn't use the polite, broken Italian tourists used. She spoke in the fluent, lyrical, rapid-fire dialect of the region. "Signora, il rispetto non si compra con I soldi e la classe non si indossa come un vestito. Il serpente si bilia solo perché ha paura dell'aquila. Ma'am, respect cannot be bought with money, and class cannot be worn like a dress. The snake hisses only because it is afraid of the eagle." The silence that followed was absolute. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to drop away. Donatella's eyes went wide. She looked at Lucia as if she were seeing a ghost. Her mouth opened slightly, her hand going to the pearl necklace at her throat. Lorenzo froze. He looked from his mother to the waitress. He didn't speak the dialect fluently, but he understood the tone, and he certainly understood the shock on his mother's face. Vanessa blinked, looking confused. What? What did she say? Did she just insult me? Lucia turned back to English, her face a mask of professional calm, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I simply told Signora Romano that I would remove the plate immediately, madam. Donatella let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound of genuine delight. No, the old woman said, a smile cracking her stern face for the first time that night. She said much more than that. Donatella looked at Lucia, really looked at her, taking in the tired eyes behind the glasses and the messy bun. Di dove sei, ragazza? Where are you from, girl? Mio padre è di Siena, ma mia nonna era di un piccolo villaggio vicino a Lucca, Lucia replied softly in Italian. My father is from Siena, but my grandmother was from a small village near Lucca. Lucca, Donatella breathed. I knew it. I could hear the earth in your voice. Excuse me. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump. I don't know what kind of secret code this is, but it is incredibly rude. Enzo, are you going to let the help mock me in a foreign language? Lorenzo held up a hand to silence Vanessa. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Lucia. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. It wasn't the look of a customer looking at a server. It was the look of a man who had just found water in a desert. You speak the dialect, Lorenzo said, his voice low. My mother hasn't heard anyone speak that dialect in New York in 20 years. It is a beautiful language, sir, Lucia said, clutching the dirty plate. It would be a shame to forget it. You are fired, Vanessa shrieked. I want you fired. Manager, Gerard. Gerard, who had been hovering nearby, sensing a disturbance, materialized instantly. He looked pale. Miss St. James? Is there a problem? This incompetent waitress is insulting me. She's conspiring with the old lady. Get her out of my sight. I want her gone, and I want this meal comped. Gerard turned on Lucia, his face twisting into a scowl. Lucia, what did you do? I told you. She did nothing, Donatella said. Her voice was no longer raspy. It was steel. She didn't look at Gerard. She looked at her son. Lorenzo, if this girl leaves, I leave. And if I leave, you can explain to the board why the matriarch of the family is no longer supporting your merger. The threat hung in the air. Lorenzo looked at Vanessa, whose face was flushed with ugly, spoiled rage. Then he looked at Lucia, who stood with dignity despite the cheap uniform, and the manager screaming at her with his eyes. Lorenzo slowly smiled. It transformed his face, taking years off his age. Gerard, Lorenzo said calmly. Yes, Mr. Romano. Lucia isn't going anywhere. In fact, Lorenzo leaned back, unbuttoning his suit jacket. I think she should join us. Pull up a chair, Lucia. What? Vanessa and Gerard shouted in unison. I said. Lorenzo's eyes didn't leave Lucia's. Pull up a chair. I want to hear more about Luca. And I think my mother would enjoy the company of someone who actually has a soul. Lucia's heart stopped. Sit with them, at the most expensive table in New York, while on the clock? Sir, I can't, Lucia stammered. I could lose my job. You won't lose your job, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a seductive, dangerous register. Because I just bought the restaurant, Vanessa gasped. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, Lorenzo said, pulling out the empty chair next to him. Please, Lucia, sit, and tell me, what else did you say about the snake and the eagle? The silence in the velvet room was deafening, broken only by the soft clinking of silverware from distant tables and the drumming of rain against the glass. Lucia stood frozen, her hand gripping the back of the velvet chair Lorenzo had pulled out for her. The manager, Gerard, looked as if he were about to faint. His face had drained of all color, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost in a cheap suit. You bought the restaurant," Vanessa sputtered, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the tablecloth. "Enzo, don't be ridiculous. You can't just buy a place like this in 30 seconds. Lorenzo didn't even look at her. He pulled his phone from his inner pocket, tapped the screen twice, and placed it on the table. "I just texted my head of acquisitions. The owner, Mr. Henderson, has been trying to sell to my hospitality group for 6 months. I just agreed to his asking price. Effective immediately, I own the building, the wine cellar, and the employment contracts of everyone in this room." He turned his dark gaze to Gerard. "Gerard, bring another wine glass, a clean one, for Lucia." Yes, Mr. Romano, right away," Gerard squeaked, practically tripping over his own feet to obey. Lucia felt like she was in a fever dream. "Mr. Romano, please, I cannot sit. I am in uniform. I smell like the kitchen." "You smell like hard work and dignity," Donatella said, gesturing imperiously to the chair. "Sit, Bambina. Do not make an old woman beg. My neck hurts looking up at you." Lucia hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair. It was soft, plush, a stark contrast to the hard wooden stool she was allowed to use in the break room. Vanessa let out a screech of laughter. "This is a joke, right? Is this some sort of reality TV prank? You're letting the help sit at the table? She's wearing an apron, for God's sake." "She is wearing the uniform of someone who provides for her family," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze vodka. "Something you have never had to do, Vanessa." Gerard returned with a crystal glass, his hands trembling as he poured the vintage Cabernet for Lucia. "Drink," Donatella commanded. "It helps with the shock." Lucia took a small sip. The wine was rich, complex, and tasted like blackberries and velvet. It was a world away from the cheap boxed wine she bought to decompress after a double shift. "So," Donatella leaned forward, ignoring Vanessa completely. "You said your father is from Siena. What does he do?" He was a carpenter," Lucia said, her voice gaining a little strength. "He restored antique furniture. That is how I fell in love with restoration. I was studying art restoration in Florence before he got sick." Lorenzo's ears perked up. "Art restoration? You have a master's." "I was 1 semester away from finishing," Lucia admitted, looking down at her glass. "My thesis was on the removal of 19th century varnish from Renaissance frescoes. But my father had a massive heart attack. The US healthcare system, well, you know, I had to come back to take care of him and pay the bills." "Boring," Vanessa groaned, throwing her napkin on the table. "Can we stop talking about the staff's sob stories? Enzo, we have tickets to the opera tomorrow. I need to know if you're wearing the tuxedo or the tails." "I'm not going," Lorenzo said simply. Vanessa froze. "Excuse me?" "I'm not going to the opera with you, Vanessa. In fact," Lorenzo turned his body fully toward her, "I think this dinner is over." "For you?" Vanessa's mouth dropped open. "You're kicking me out? For her? She's a waitress. She's a nobody. My father is—" "Your father is a business partner," Lorenzo cut in, his eyes hard. "But business does not require me to endure your cruelty toward my mother or my staff. You called my mother senile. You treated Lucia like a dog. I don't care who your father is. Get out." The air in the restaurant seemed to vanish. Several other diners were now openly staring. Vanessa stood up, her face splotchy with rage. She grabbed her purse. "You will regret this, Lorenzo. You think this little peasant girl is special? She's a gold digger. She saw a rich man and his mommy and played the Italian card. It's pathetic." She turned her glare on Lucia. "And you. Don't get comfortable. You stepped into a world you don't understand. I crush cockroaches like you for sport." With a final dramatic hair flip, Vanessa stormed out of the restaurant, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. Silence returned to the table, but it wasn't tense anymore. It was lighter. Donatella let out a long sigh of relief. Finally, the air smells clean again. She looked at Lucia and winked. "You did good, ragazza. You didn't say a word and you won." Lucia managed a shy smile. "I didn't mean to cause trouble, signora." "Trouble is exactly what my son needs," Donatella said, patting Lorenzo's hand. "He has been dead inside for 3 years. Look at him now. He has color in his cheeks." Lorenzo actually blushed. He looked at Lucia, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Ignore my mother," he said softly. "But she is right about one thing. I am sorry for how you were treated, and I am serious about the restaurant. You are no longer a waitress here." Lucia's stomach dropped. "Wait, does that mean I'm fired?" "Mr. Romano, please, I need the insurance for my dad." "No," Lorenzo smiled, a genuine, warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "It means you are promoted. But we can discuss that later. For now, tell me about the Renaissance frescoes. There is a specific piece in my family's estate in Tuscany that has been giving us nightmares." For the next hour, Lucia forgot she was wearing an apron. She forgot the pain in her feet. She spoke of solvents and pigments, of the patience required to save history. She watched Lorenzo listen, really listen, hanging on her every word, while Donatella nodded in approval, eating her dinner with gusto for the first time in months. It was the best hour of Lucia's life. But she knew, deep down, that midnight strikes for every Cinderella. The rain had stopped by the time they left the restaurant, leaving the New York streets glistening under the streetlights. A sleek black limousine idled at the curb, the driver holding the back door open. Lucia stood on the sidewalk, shivering slightly in the cool night air. She had removed her apron, but she still wore the white button-down and black slacks of the staff. "Allow me to drive you home," Lorenzo offered, stepping up beside her. He towered over her, radiating warmth and the scent of expensive sandalwood. "Oh, no, thank you," Lucia said quickly, clutching her purse. I take the subway. It's faster." "Nonsense," Donatella said, leaning on her cane as the driver helped her into the car. "A girl who knows the dialect of Lucca does not take the subway at 11 p.m. Get in the car." "My mother is rarely wrong," Lorenzo said with a smirk, "and I would feel better knowing you are safe. Besides, I want to hear more about your father. Which hospital is he in?" "St. Jude's," Lucia admitted. "I was actually going there now to say good night to him before visiting Hour's End." "Then we go to St. Jude's," Lorenzo decided. He gently placed a hand on the small of her back to guide her into the car. The touch was electric, sending a jolt through Lucia's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The interior of the limo was like a spaceship, soft leather, ambient lighting, and absolute silence from the outside world. As they drove through the city, Lorenzo asked about her father's condition. "It's congestive heart failure," Lucia explained, her voice tight. "He needs a valve replacement, but the specialist is expensive, and the waiting list is long. I'm working double shifts here and at a diner in the mornings to save up for the deposit." Lorenzo frowned, his brow furrowing. "A deposit for a life-saving surgery. That is barbaric." "That is reality," Lucia said, looking out the window. "But he is strong. He raised me alone after my mum died. He sold his tools to send me to Italy. I will do whatever it takes to save him." Lorenzo looked at her profile, the determination in her jaw, the sadness in her eyes. He had dated supermodels, heiresses, and actresses. They all wanted his money, his status, his name. This girl, wearing cheap polyester and exhausted from serving ungrateful people, only wanted to save her father. "You said you were 1 semester away from your degree," Lorenzo said. "If you could finish, would you?" "In a heartbeat," Lucia whispered. "But dreams don't pay hospital bills." The car pulled up to the entrance of St. Jude's. Lucia turned to them. "Thank you for the ride, for treating me like a person." "Lucia," Lorenzo caught her hand before she could open the door. His skin was warm against hers. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Come to the Romano Tower, the penthouse floor." "Why?" "Because I have a job for you, and it doesn't involve carrying water." Lucia looked into his eyes, searching for a trick. She found only sincerity. "Okay," she breathed. "I'll be there." She watched the limo drive away before turning to the hospital doors. She felt lighter than she had in months. Maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. She walked into the lobby, heading for the elevators, but the night nurse, a kind woman named Brenda, intercepted her. Brenda looked worried. "Lucia, honey, I'm glad you're here." "Is it Dad?" Lucia panicked, her heart stopping. "Is he okay?" "He's stable," Brenda said quickly, putting a hand on Lucia's arm. "Physically, he's fine. But we had a call from the administration office about an hour ago." "The administration office? At this hour?" Brenda sighed, looking uncomfortable. "They said there was a flag on your payment plan. An anonymous tip came in, claiming that your income declaration was fraudulent. They've frozen the account, Lucia. They're saying if you don't pay the full balance of the current stay by tomorrow noon, they'll have to transfer him to the state facility." Lucia felt the blood drain from her face. The state facility was underfunded, overcrowded, and miles away. He wouldn't survive the transfer, let alone the care there. "Fraudulent? That's impossible. I showed them my pay stubs." "I know, honey. But this tip, it came from someone high up. They mentioned Vanessa St. James made an inquiry about your solvency." Lucia grabbed the nurse's desk for support. The world spun. Vanessa. She hadn't just left the restaurant. She had gone to war. She knew Lucia worked hard. It wasn't hard to find out who she was. Vanessa had connections everywhere. She had called the hospital, likely using her father's influence, to flag the account. "She's trying to kill him," Lucia whispered, horror rising in her throat like bile. "She's trying to kill my father to punish me." "You have until noon tomorrow," Brenda said softly. "I'm so sorry." Lucia walked to her father's room in a daze. He was sleeping, looking frail and small in the hospital bed, the machines beeping a steady rhythm. She sat in the plastic chair next to him, holding his rough, calloused hand. Tears streamed down her face. The hope she had felt in the limo shattered. Lorenzo offered her a job, but Vanessa held her father's life hostage. If she went to Lorenzo, would it look like she was just using him for money, exactly like Vanessa said she was? Gold digger. The insult echoed in her mind. If she asked Lorenzo for help immediately after meeting him, she would prove Vanessa right. But if she didn't, her father would suffer. Lucia tightened her grip on her father's hand. Her sadness hardened into something else, something colder. "Don't worry, Papa," she whispered into the dark room. "I won't let them take you, and I won't let her win." She wiped her tears. She would go to Romano Tower at 9 a.m., not to beg, but to negotiate. She had a skill Lorenzo needed, the art restoration. She would sell her talent, not her soul. But as the sun rose over the city, Lucia realized she had underestimated the enemy. Her phone buzzed, a notification from a local gossip blog. Scandal at the Velvet Room. Waitress seduces billionaire in front of fiancé? Exclusive photos inside. She clicked the link. There was a blurry photo of Lorenzo touching her back as she entered the limo. The caption read, "Sources say the waitress, Lucia, staged a scene to humiliate socialite Vanessa St. James. Is this the new face of gold digging?" Lucia stared at the screen. Vanessa was destroying her reputation before she even walked into the interview. She stood up, smoothing her wrinkled clothes. She put on her glasses. "Okay, Vanessa," Lucia said, her voice shaking with rage. "You want a villain? You just made one." She walked out of the hospital, ready to face the lion's den. The lobby of Romano Tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, designed to make anyone earning less than 7 figures feel small. Lucia walked toward the reception desk, her head held high, ignoring the whispers. The receptionist, a woman with hair sprayed into a blonde helmet, looked up from her computer. Her eyes flicked to Lucia's face, then to the tablet on her desk, which, Lucia was certain, was displaying the gossip article about the gold-digging waitress. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone dripping with ice. "Deliveries are in the back." "I am not a delivery," Lucia said firmly. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Lorenzo Romano." The receptionist smirked. "Mr. Romano is a very busy man. I don't have you on the—" "Send her up," a deep voice resonated from the security speaker on the desk. The receptionist jumped. It was Lorenzo. "Immediately." The receptionist turned a shade of pale, usually reserved for raw dough. "Yeah, yes, sir. Elevator 1. Lucia stepped into the private elevator. As it shot up 50 floors, her stomach churned. She wasn't here to flirt. She wasn't here to play games. She was here to save her father. The doors opened directly into the penthouse office. It was expansive, with a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. But Lucia didn't look at the view. She looked at the easel set up in the center of the room, covered by a silk cloth. Lorenzo stood by the window, looking out. He wore a navy suit today, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked less like a corporate shark and more like a brooding artist. "Good morning," he said, turning to face her. "You saw the article?" "I did," Lucia said, stepping into the room. "And I assume you did too. If you think I called the paparazzi—" "I know you didn't," Lorenzo interrupted gently. "The IP address that sent the tip belongs to a burner phone registered to a shell company owned by St. James Enterprises. Vanessa is not as clever as she thinks." He walked over to the easel. "Forget Vanessa for a moment. I want to show you something." He pulled the silk cloth away. Lucia gasped. On the easel sat a painting, clearly old, perhaps late 17th century. It was a portrait of a woman with dark eyes, holding a pomegranate. But the canvas was in terrible shape. A jagged tear ran through the background, and layers of yellowed varnish obscured the colors. Someone had tried to clean it clumsily in the past, leaving abrasion marks on the cheek. "My great-great-grandmother," Lorenzo said softly. "It hung in our villa in Tuscany for generations. During the war, it was hidden in a cellar. The moisture nearly destroyed it. I have interviewed 5 restorers in New York. They all want to repaint it. They want to make it look new." Lucia stepped closer, her eyes scanning the damage. Her hands itched to work. "No," she whispered. "You cannot repaint it. That would destroy the integrity. You need to remove the oxidized varnish with a solvent gel, likely a mixture of acetone and mineral spirits, but very mild. You have to consolidate the flaking paint first. And the tear, you need to weave the canvas threads back together from the behind, not patch it." She looked at Lorenzo, her eyes blazing with professional intensity. "If you repaint her, you erase her history. You erase the war she survived." Lorenzo stared at her. The silence stretched for a long moment. "You are hired," he said. Lucia blinked. Just like that. "You are the only one who spoke about the history, not the cost," Lorenzo said. "I will pay you $10,000 for the restoration, plus materials." Lucia's heart hammered. 10,000. It was enough for the deposit at the hospital. It was a miracle. "I accept," Lucia said, her voice trembling slightly. "But, Mr. Romano, I have a condition." Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I need the payment today. Up front." Lorenzo's expression cooled slightly. He walked back to his desk and leaned against it. "That is unusual. Typically it is 50% upon completion." "Why the urgency?" Lucia took a deep breath. She could lie. She could make up an excuse. But she looked at the painting of the woman who survived a war, and she looked at the man who loved his mother. "Because Vanessa St. James froze my father's hospital account," Lucia said, the words spilling out. "She used her father's connections to flag me for fraud. If I don't pay the full balance by noon, they are transferring him to a state facility, and he won't survive the move." Lorenzo went perfectly still. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She did what?" "She is trying to kill him to punish me," Lucia said, tears pricking her eyes. "I am not a gold digger, Mr. Romano. I just want to save my dad." Lorenzo didn't speak. He picked up his desk phone. He dialed a number. "Get me the chief administrator at St. Jude's Hospital. Now." He waited 10 seconds, his eyes locked on Lucia's. When he spoke again, his voice was a low growl that terrified her, even though it wasn't directed at her. "This is Lorenzo Romano. You have a patient named Marco Rossi. Yes, I know who he is. You have a flag on his account. Remove it. Immediately. I don't care who placed it. Listen to me very closely. I am transferring $200,000 to the hospital's general fund in the next 5 minutes. That covers Mr. Rossi's care for the next year in a private suite. If anyone tries to move him, or if Miss St. James calls again, you answer to me, and I will buy the building and fire you. Do we understand each other?" He slammed the phone down. Lucia stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth. "Mr. Romano, 200,000? I can't repay that." Lorenzo walked around the desk. He stopped inches from her. He reached out and gently took her hands, pulling them away from her face. "You don't have to repay it," he said fiercely. "Vanessa brought a war to my doorstep. She attacked the innocent family of my employee. That is an insult to me. You focus on the painting, Lucia. I will handle the monster." 3 weeks passed. Life fell into a strange, beautiful rhythm. Lucia spent her days in a converted studio space within the Romano Tower, working on the portrait. The smell of solvents and oil paint replaced the smell of restaurant grease. Her father was recovering beautifully in a private room at St. Jude's, with the best cardiologists in the city attending to him. He didn't know the details, only that Lucia had landed a big contract. But the best part of the days were the evenings. Lorenzo would come down to the studio around 6 p.m. He would loosen his tie, pour 2 glasses of wine, and just watch her work. They talked for hours, not about money or business, but about art, about Italy, about their childhoods. Lucia learned that Lorenzo hated the shipping business. He only ran it to keep his father's legacy alive. He wanted to open a foundation for Italian heritage. Lorenzo learned that Lucia sang opera in the shower and that she was terrified of thunderstorms. It was intimate, it was quiet, it was perfect, and it was about to explode. "The Romano Foundation Gala is in 2 days," Lorenzo said one evening, watching Lucia carefully apply a retouching varnish to the painting. "We will unveil the portrait then. It will be the centerpiece." "It's ready," Lucia said, stepping back and wiping her hands on a rag. The painting glowed. The woman in the portrait looked alive, her eyes warm and wise. "She's beautiful. She looks like you," Lorenzo murmured. Lucia blushed, turning to him. "Lorenzo, He stepped closer, the magnetic pull between them undeniable. He reached out, tucking a stray curl of hair behind her ear. "Lucia, these past weeks, I have never felt this way. You see me. Not the billionaire, but me." He leaned in. Lucia's breath hitched. Their lips were inches apart when the studio door banged open. "Well, isn't this cozy?" They sprang apart. Vanessa St. James stood in the doorway, flanked by two men in suits. She looked manic, her eyes wide and wild. "Vanessa," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "Security was instructed to ban you from the building." "I have my ways," Vanessa hissed. She walked into the room, eyeing the painting. "So this is what cost me my fiancé. A dirty old picture restored by a dirty little waitress." "Get out," Lorenzo commanded. "Now." "Or what? You'll buy another hospital?" Vanessa laughed, a brittle sound. "You think you've won, Enzo, but you forget who my father is. He owns the tabloids. He owns half the board of your company. If you don't dump this charity case and announce our reconciliation at the gala, my father will pull his funding from the Romano merger. Your stock will tank. You will lose everything." She turned her sneer to Lucia. "And you?" I dug a little deeper. "Did you know your student visa technically expired 3 days before you filed for renewal? It's a grey area, sure, but a call to immigration could make things very black and white." "How does deportation sound? Taking your sick daddy back to Italy on an economy flight?" Lucia felt the blood drain from her face. It was true. There had been a paperwork mix-up during her father's heart attack. It was resolved, she thought, but a powerful lawyer could reopen it. "You are evil," Lucia whispered. "I am a winner," Vanessa corrected. She walked up to the easel. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small bottle of black ink. "No!" Lucia screamed, lunging forward. Vanessa uncapped the bottle and swung her arm toward the masterpiece, but Lorenzo was faster. He moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He grabbed Vanessa's wrist mid-air, squeezing it hard. Vanessa yelped, dropping the bottle. It shattered on the floor, splashing ink onto Lorenzo's expensive leather shoes, but missing the painting by inches. "Touch that painting," Lorenzo snarled, his face inches from hers. "And I will not just sue you. I will dismantle your life, brick by brick. I will expose your father's offshore accounts. I will release the security footage of you threatening an employee. I will make you a pariah in this city." He shoved her back. Vanessa stumbled, rubbing her wrist, looking truly frightened for the first time. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. "The merger." "To hell with the merger," Lorenzo roared. "Security." 4 guards rushed into the room. "Escort Miss St. James out," Lorenzo ordered. "And if she comes within 500 feet of this building, or Lucia, or the hospital, call the police and press charges for trespassing and attempted destruction of property." Vanessa was dragged out, screaming obscenities. When the door closed, silence fell. Lucia was shaking. She sank onto a stool, burying her face in her hands. "She's right," Lucia sobbed. "She can ruin you. The merger. The stock." Lorenzo knelt before her. He took her hands, ignoring the ink on his shoes. "Lucia, look at me." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I don't care about the stock. I don't care about the money. I have spent my whole life doing what is smart for the family name. But my mother was right. I was a zombie. He kissed her palms, gentle and reverent. You woke me up. You saved my family's history. He gestured to the painting. Now let me save your future. But the gala, Lucia whispered. She said she'll destroy us there. Lorenzo's eyes darkened, a cold, ruthless resolve settling in them. Let her try, he said. The gala is in 2 days, and I have a plan. Vanessa wants a show? We will give her a show she will never forget. He stood up and pulled Lucia into his arms. Go home, rest, buy a dress, not a black waitress uniform, a dress for a queen, because on Saturday night you are not walking behind me. You are walking beside me. Lucia buried her face in his chest, listening to his strong, steady heartbeat. She was terrified, but as she held on to him, she realized something. The waitress was gone. The victim was gone. It was time for the Italian girl from Lucca to fight back. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered like the inside of a diamond. Crystal chandeliers cast a prism of light over New York's elite. Senators, tech moguls, and fashion icons, all gathered for the annual Romano Foundation Gala. The air buzzed with whispers. The tabloids had been relentless for 2 days, fueled by Vanessa's leaks. Everyone knew the narrative. The billionaire heir had lost his mind over a waitress. They were all waiting for the crash. Lucia stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand trembling on the velvet railing. She wasn't wearing an apron tonight. She wore a gown of liquid gold silk that Lorenzo had commissioned specially for her. It hugged her frame, cascading down to the floor, simple yet regal. Her hair was swept up, revealing diamond earrings that had belonged to Lorenzo's grandmother. Breathe, Lorenzo whispered, stepping up beside her. He looked devastating in a tuxedo, his eyes fierce and protective. You are the queen of this castle tonight. Everyone else is just a guest. They hate me, Lucia whispered, spotting the judging eyes below. They don't know you, Lorenzo corrected, but they will. He offered his arm. Andiamoci, let's go. As they descended the stairs, the room went silent. The sheer visual impact of the couple was undeniable. Lorenzo Romano, the ice-cold tycoon, looked at the woman beside him with a warmth that could melt glaciers. And Lucia, the waitress, walked with the natural grace of a woman who had carried the weight of the world and not broken. They reached the stage where the veiled painting stood. Donatella Romano was already there, seated on a throne-like chair, clutching her cane. She gave Lucia a subtle, approving nod. Lorenzo took the microphone. Welcome. Tonight is about legacy. It is about preserving what matters. For years, the Romano family has been known for shipping, for industry. But tonight, we return to our roots, to art, to beauty. He gestured to the easel, and to restore our history, we needed a master. Not a technician, but an artist. He reached for the veil. Stop this charade! The shrill voice cut through the room like a siren. Vanessa St. James marched toward the stage, wearing a dress so red it looked like a wound. She held a microphone she had clearly snatched from the MC. The crowd gasped. Phones went up instantly, recording the drama. Vanessa, Lorenzo said into the mic, his voice calm but amplified. You were uninvited. And let you ruin your family name without a fight? Vanessa laughed, turning to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, look at her. A waitress, a girl who was scrubbing tables 3 weeks ago, is now wearing family jewels. She is a fraud. She seduced him for a green card because her father is dying and broke. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was ugly. It was personal. Vanessa pointed a manicured finger at Lucia. I have proof. I have records showing her visa status is questionable. I have financial records showing she is destitute. She is conning you, Lorenzo, and you are too weak to see it. Lucia stepped forward. She didn't need Lorenzo to shield her this time. She walked to the edge of the stage, the gold dress shimmering under the lights. She looked Vanessa in the eye. "My father is not dying and broke," Lucia said, her voice clear and steady without a microphone, projecting with the training of an opera singer. "He is recovering, because a good man helped him. And yes, I was a waitress. I scrubbed tables. I served water. I stood on my feet for 12 hours a day to pay for his medicine." She paused, looking out at the billionaires in the room. "Is that shameful? Is working hard to save a parent a crime in this room? If it is, then I do not want to belong here." A hush fell over the crowd. "But you, Vanessa," Lucia continued, her voice gaining steel, "you have never worked a day in your life. You treat people like disposable objects. You tried to kill my father by freezing his hospital account just to hurt me. You call me poor? You are the poorest person here." "Lies!" Vanessa shrieked. "Security! Remove her!" "No," a new voice boomed. Donatella Romano stood up. She didn't need her cane. She walked to the center of the stage, took the microphone from Lorenzo, and turned to Vanessa. "You speak of legacy, Vanessa St. James," Donatella said, her voice raspy but terrifyingly powerful. "You speak of class. But you have none. I have heard the recording." Vanessa froze. "What recording?" Lorenzo stepped forward, pressing a button on a small remote. Suddenly, the speakers that were playing classical music cracked to life. Vanessa's voice filled the ballroom, the recording from the security system in the studio 2 days ago. "Touch that painting, and I will not just sue you. I will dismantle your life," came Lorenzo's voice, followed by Vanessa's screeching response. "I dug a little deeper. A call to immigration could make things very black and white. Taking your sick daddy back to Italy." The recording continued, playing the sound of Vanessa smashing the ink bottle. The malice, the cruelty, the premeditated attack was audible to every influential person in New York. The crowd turned on her instantly. Faces that looked amused before now looked disgusted. "You attacked my employee," Lorenzo said, his voice cold. "You attempted to destroy a 17th century masterpiece, and you committed fraud by impersonating a family member to access hospital records. The police are waiting in the lobby, Vanessa." Vanessa stumbled back, her face draining of color. She looked for her father in the crowd, but the real estate mogul had turned his back on her, signaling the ultimate abandonment. "Enzo, please," she whimpered. "It was just a game. I love you." "You don't know what love is," Lorenzo said. He signaled to the security team. "Get her out." As the guards escorted a sobbing, humiliated Vanessa out of the ballroom, the room erupted, not in gossip, but in applause. It started slow, initiated by Donatella, and soon the entire room joined in. Lorenzo turned to Lucia. "Are you all right?" "I think so," she breathed, her adrenaline fading. "Then let us finish what we started." Together they pulled the veil from the painting. The crowd gasped in genuine awe. The portrait of the woman with the pomegranate was breathtaking. The colors were vibrant, the tear invisible, the face glowing with life. It was a masterpiece of restoration. "To the woman in the painting," Lorenzo said, raising a glass. "And to the woman who saved her." He turned to Lucia, ignoring the hundreds of people watching. He took a small velvet box from his pocket. "Lorenzo?" Lucia's eyes went wide. "I didn't buy a ring," Lorenzo admitted, opening the box to reveal a simple, ancient gold band set with a single, deep red ruby. "This was my great-grandmother's ring, the woman in the painting. She wore it through the war. She wore it when she rebuilt our family from nothing. It belongs to a woman with strength. It belongs to you." He knelt. Lucia, you spoke to my mother in the language of home. You spoke to my heart in the language of truth. Will you marry me? Will you help me restore the rest of my life?" Lucia looked at the ring, then at Donatella, who was wiping a tear from her eye, and finally at Lorenzo. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes. Sì, mille volte sì." Lorenzo slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, a kiss that sealed the promise of a lifetime. Outside, the rain began to fall on New York City, washing away the dust and the grime. But inside, everything was warm, golden, and finally, perfectly restored. The waitress had become the queen, not because of the dress or the ring, but because she was the only one in the castle with a heart of gold. And as for Vanessa, the papers the next day didn't mention her social status. They only mentioned her arraignment. Karma, as Lucia knew, was a dish best served publicly, with a side of justice. And that, my friends, is how the invisible waitress silenced the loudest voice in the room. It's a powerful reminder that true class isn't about what you wear or who your father is. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Vanessa thought her money made her untouchable, but in the end, her own cruelty became her prison. Lucia proved that dignity, hard work, and love are currencies that never devalue. What did you think of Donatella's reaction? I absolutely loved seeing the fierce mother protect Lucia. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and romantic justice, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this with a friend who needs a smile today. And hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.